Have you ever felt stuck even though you knew exactly what you needed to do? As if there was an invisible force holding your arms, muffling your voice, sabotaging the next step you swore to take the day before. It's like living inside an unfulfilled promise, not for lack of intention, but for something deeper, something that the conscious mind cannot control. This feeling of paralysis is not laziness, nor simple procrastination. It is vibrational pain. It is undigested memory. It is stagnant energy. It is the body repeating the fear before you even try to move. Napoleon Hill called this the mind hypnotized by doubt, a silent, sneaky state that gradually sets in without fanfare until you begin to believe that perhaps you were not born to achieve. He said that doubt is the child of the absence of purpose, but what he also revealed between the lines is that behind the doubt there is trauma. There is a past that has not dissolved. There is a wound that, even though it does not bleed, pulsates. Joe Dispenza explains that the body can become the mind, and when this happens, you stop acting like a dreamer and start behaving like a survivor. The nervous system, conditioned by fear, rejection, and the repetition of almosts, begins to take over. And then you don't act. Not because you don't want to, but because your body has learned to associate movement with pain, with failure, with humiliation. Taking action becomes dangerous. Standing still becomes familiar. And the familiar, even if painful, disguises itself as safety. It is important to understand that there is a subtle but profound difference between procrastination and energetic blockage. Procrastination is temporary laziness, but vibrational blockage is deeper. It occurs when your mind wants to, but your frequency doesn't allow it. When the intention is there, but the energy doesn't follow suit. It's like accelerating a car with the handbrake on. You hear the engine, you feel the desire, but you don't move. This is the point where many give up, but this can also be the point where everything starts to change. Andrew Carnegie said that movement precedes confidence, not the other way around. Waiting to feel confident before acting is like waiting for water to boil before turning on the stove. It is the act that generates heat. It is the movement that summons energy. It is the choice to act, even when afraid, that activates the vibrational flow of courage. And this truth, however uncomfortable it may be, is liberating, because it reveals that you don't need to feel ready. You just need to start. Start small. Start imperfectly, but start. Therefore, not acting is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that there is something inside you that has not yet been seen with love, something that needs to be embraced, not fought. The root of emotional paralysis is invisible. It hides in the story you tell yourself when no one is listening. It lives in the phrases you heard as a child, in the looks that made you doubt, in the promises you made to yourself in moments of pain. I will never try again. I can't stand making mistakes anymore. I won't expose myself again. This introduction is an invitation, a call for you to look at your paralysis not as a weakness, but as a portal to reconnect with your vibrational truth. Because behind resistance, there is a desire. Behind blockage, there is a mission. And behind fear, almost always, there is a purpose trying to be reborn. Now that the veil has begun to lift, let's delve into the deeper layers of this journey. Because what blocks you is not always visible, but it can and will be healed. What's paralyzing you might not be laziness, lack of focus, or poor time management. Maybe it's a memory so old and so embedded in your nervous system that it no longer presents itself as a memory, but as a sensation, like a silence that screams when you try to start, when you try to change, when you dare to leave the familiar. Some people call this procrastination, but its real name might be trauma, an emotional trauma, hidden, forgotten, dormant behind the apparent inability to act. Sometimes you sit down to start a project and suddenly your body feels heavy. Fatigue appears out of nowhere. Your mind starts looking for distractions, and you feel small, weak, powerless. But deep down, it's not about that project. It's about a past moment when you tried and failed, tried and were ridiculed, tried and lost something, tried and were hurt. The body remembers. The mind may have forgotten, rationalized, overcome it, but the body, no. And this body, which has become the mind, responds with withdrawal, with freezing, with paralysis. You are not broken. You are conditioned, and this conditioning is not your fault. It was built over experiences that taught you that acting was dangerous, that shining was judgmental, that making mistakes was grounds for punishment, that being you was too risky. So now every time you try to take a step towards something new, this wounded and protective part of you steps in. Like an invisible bodyguard, it tries to keep you safe. And safety, for it, is staying with what is already known, even if it means stagnation. So when you say, I can't start, maybe what you're really saying is, I'm afraid of failing again. I'm afraid of being seen. I'm afraid of losing the love I have. I'm afraid of not being enough. These fears are not irrational. They have deep roots, but they are also not absolute. They can be dissolved, reprogrammed, transcended. And it all starts with recognition. What you call laziness may actually be a silent cry for emotional protection. The transformation begins when you stop blaming yourself, when you stop calling yourself lazy, undisciplined, or weak, and you start asking yourself, what is this paralysis trying to protect me from feeling? What is it hiding? What part of me still believes that acting is risky? What part of me has learned that moving is hurting? When you embrace this part, instead of fighting it, something starts to change. The rigidity starts to give way. The defense starts to dissolve. Because the body doesn't need shouting. It needs safety. It needs permission. It needs a new meaning associated with action. A vibrational meaning. A field where acting is not synonymous with pain, but with freedom. And that's when we start to break the cycle, to make room for a new kind of movement. A movement that doesn't come from demanding, but from reconnecting. A movement that doesn't require force, but presence. Because when the soul recognizes that it is safe to act, the body follows. And when the body moves, fear begins to lose its form. Because fear is not solid. It is energy. And energy, when embraced and realigned, transforms. The mind loves to be busy, planning, studying, organizing, researching, creating endless lists, checking out videos, books, courses. It seems productive. It seems intelligent. It seems committed. But often, it is just a disguise, an elegant hiding place, a kind of escape that carries the appearance of action, but hides the fear of actually starting. Eternal preparation is a subtle trap, a ritual repeated by those who are more committed to the illusion of control than to the risk of transformation. It is a sophisticated cycle. You tell yourself that it is not the right time yet, that you need to understand more, that you need to be more confident, clearer, more inspired. And so time passes, the days pile up, and what was preparation turns into prison. The mind builds justifications, theories, mental maps, and the heart empties, because somewhere deep down, it knows, it feels, that all of this is just fear with another name. Fear of failure, fear of exposing yourself, fear of being seen trying, and perhaps failing. This search for perfection before acting is born from an old wound, the belief that making mistakes is unacceptable, that everything needs to be perfect before you start, that you will only be loved if you get it right the first time. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life pulses in improvisation, in the courage to learn by doing, in the humility to adjust your course as you go. And the soul, the one that vibrates inside you, doesn't care about perfection. It wants presence. It wants truth. It wants to feel that you are alive, even when you stumble. Napoleon Hill spoke of the danger of getting stuck in what he called analysis without action, a state where you think so much that you disconnect from feeling, where excess knowledge numbs the impulse to move, where fear is disguised as preparation. He knew that many used studying as an excuse. Because studying is comfortable, you remain in the world of ideas, safe, invisible, untouched. But real transformation requires risk. It requires vulnerability. It requires presence. There is no book, course, or plan that can replace the act of doing. True knowledge is born from the body in movement, from the soul in attempt, from the heart in surrender. What liberates is no longer a technique. It is the choice to leave the hiding place, to look at fear, and even so, walk. To understand that the security you seek will not come before action. It only appears afterwards. It is born from confrontation, from the vibrational commitment to your own expansion. So the question that echoes now is not how much you already know, but how much you are willing to feel, to move, to leave theory behind. Because any preparation that does not lead to movement becomes a golden prison, shiny on the outside, but suffocating on the inside. And the soul, sooner or later, begins to scream inside this cell, asking not for perfect answers, but for authenticity, for truth, for real action, even if imperfect, even if shaky. Even now, waiting for motivation may seem sensible. It even seems intuitive. After all, who has never said to themselves, "When I feel inspired, I'll start"? The idea that you need to feel like doing something before you can act is so ingrained in the collective imagination that few question it. But this silent wait often turns into paralysis, because motivation is not the cause of movement, it is its consequence. The body does not release energy through intention, but through gesture, through action, through the concrete decision to start, even without the will. Neuroscience has already proven that dopamine, the neurotransmitter that activates focus and reward, is not released when you think about acting. It is triggered when you move, when you break inertia, when you do it, even when you are afraid, even when you are lazy, even when you don't know exactly what you are doing. It is the action that awakens the brain. It is the step that creates the impulse, and not the other way around. This truth changes everything, because it means that you don't have to wait to feel. You just have to act. The feeling will come later. There is something profoundly liberating about this logic, because it dispels the illusion that there is something wrong with you for not feeling motivated. There is nothing wrong. There is just a biological cycle that has not yet been activated. And this cycle begins with the body, with the simplest gesture, with the smallest beginning, because the energy is dormant, not absent. It is within you, but it needs a vibrational invitation, a subtle command, a signal that it is safe to awaken. Waiting for motivation is like waiting for a fire to heat up before lighting it. It is like waiting for the sun to rise before opening your eyes. The natural order of things is different. First you light it, then comes the heat. First you act, then comes the enthusiasm. This inversion of logic is what keeps so many people stuck, because they are waiting for an emotional state that will only be accessed after movement. And while they wait, they feed the frustration. And this frustration, in turn, reinforces the paralysis. A subtle but profound cycle. Napoleon Hill understood this principle clearly. He saw action as a vibrational catalyst, a gesture of faith, a ritual of trust, because acting without motivation is a type of silent courage. It is saying to the universe, even without desire, I am here. Even without knowing, I move. Even without certainty, I choose. And this choice in itself changes your frequency, aligns your field, and creates the space where motivation can finally flourish. It is not about feeling first, it is about being the first to act, even without strength, even without brightness, even in the dark. Because motivation is not the beacon that guides you, it is the light that turns on when you are already on the path. And for those who have been in the dark for a long time, even the smallest spark is a miracle. It is a new beginning. It is life that starts beating again. There is a truth that is rarely spoken about in the world of manifestation, a kind of uncomfortable secret that many prefer to ignore. Visualizing without taking action is not magic. It is dissonance. It is like promising the universe that you want something, but showing with your body that you are not yet ready to receive it. It is saying, I want, with your mind, but vibrating, I doubt, with each unfulfilled gesture. And this silent conflict creates spiritual frustration. It creates the feeling that something is wrong with you, when in fact the misalignment is in the energy, not in the intention. The law of attraction, when misunderstood, becomes a dangerous trap. It feeds the illusion that imagining is enough, that feeling is everything, that the universe will bring you what you want just because you thought hard enough. But that is only half the equation. Thought is the seed, but action is the fertile soil where that seed takes root. Without movement, there is no root. Without root, there is no manifestation. Only dream, only hope, only emptiness. Napoleon Hill, long before the popularization of vibrational language, warned, "Desire without action is just fantasy, and fantasy, when prolonged, turns into pain, because the body begins to perceive the distance between what is desired and what is experienced. And this distance, when not crossed with steps, becomes suffering. It becomes anguish. It becomes a feeling of incapacity. It is the heart saying, 'I see what I want, but I can't touch it.' And this hurts. It tires. It drains faith. It is necessary to understand that visualization is only the first touch. It is the signal. But the universe responds to coherence, not to loose desire. It aligns itself with the frequency that you sustain consistently, not with the mental image that you project sporadically. Visualization is powerful, but it needs to be accompanied by gestures, by decisions, by actions, even if minimal, that vibrationally confirm what was imagined. Without this, what was supposed to be sacred becomes a cycle of self-sabotage. When you imagine a future, but act out of fear, the vibrational field goes into conflict. The heart asks for direction, but the feet remain in the same place. The soul desires expansion, but habits sustain stagnation. And the universe observes, not with judgment, but with precision. It captures your vibration, not your intention. It responds to what you sustain, not to what you dream only in your spare time. That is why it is not enough to imagine. You have to move. Even if it is a small step, a symbolic gesture, an act that says without words, "I am ready to live what I visualized." Because when visualization meets action, the field aligns. The body vibrates in tune with the dream, and it is at that point, and only at that point, that the miracle begins to take shape, that the invisible begins to become touchable, that the universe begins to respond not only to what you think, but to what you have become. There are times when the body seems too heavy to move. The mind wants to move forward. The soul asks for change, but the gesture does not come. And in this abyss between wanting and doing, many people get lost. It is in these moments that the power of micro-action is born, not as a simplistic technique, but as an energetic reconnection with the present. When everything seems too big, too confusing, too paralyzing, micro-action emerges as a ray of light in the midst of vibrational darkness. What behavioral science and practical spirituality already understand is that movement, no matter how small, reactivates the field of possibilities. A 2-minute gesture has the power to interrupt the repetitive cycle of stagnation. 2 minutes, not to solve everything, but to open a crack, to signal to the body that it is safe to come out of torpor, to communicate to the mind that there is a choice, to tell the energy that the flow has returned. This type of action is not about productivity. It is about vibrational reconfiguration. It is like touching a forgotten string and watching it vibrate again. A simple getting up from a chair, a symbolic arrangement, a beginning, even without a clear direction. Because when you move, you break the pattern. And by breaking the pattern, you release energy, and that energy, previously trapped in inertia, begins to circulate again. It begins to remind you of who you are. Napoleon Hill understood the value of the small impulse. He understood that power lies not in great heroic actions, but in the ability to create rhythm. And rhythm only arises when there is a first sound, a first step, a first gesture. Micro-action is not a magic solution, it is a vibrational code. A signal sent to the field saying, "I am back." And this return, however subtle, is profoundly powerful. The soul does not demand haste. It demands presence. And micro-action is presence in the form of decision. It is you saying to yourself, "I am still here. I am still trying. I still care. Even if fear is present, even if doubt still whispers, the smallest action creates an opening. And where there is an opening, light enters. Where there is light, there is a path. And where there is a path, there is life that is reborn. Sometimes it's not what you think that's blocking you. It's what you believe without realizing it. There are voices so old inside us that they no longer sound like thoughts, but like truths. Inherited beliefs, repeated, passed down through generations. Ideas about what is safe, what is right, what is acceptable. And among these silent voices, one of the most treacherous is the one that tells you that acting quickly is dangerous. That if you rush, you will make mistakes. That if you make mistakes, you will be judged. And if you are judged, you will be excluded. These beliefs often did not arise from direct experiences. They came from the fears of those who raised us, from warnings filled with love, but also with anxiety. Don't take risks. Think carefully before everything. Be careful not to regret it. Phrases that seemed to protect, but that, over time, have turned into walls. Invisible walls that today prevent you from taking action, because your energy still carries the impression that acting is putting yourself at risk, that moving is exposing yourself too much, that making decisions is too dangerous to be done lightly. What few realize is that these beliefs do not live only in the mind. They settle in the vibrational field. They shape your impulses. They reduce your courage. They silence your spontaneity. And the more you try to move forward, the more these subtle ideas become barriers. Not as screaming thoughts, but as soft sensations of hesitation, like a weight you cannot name, like an almost that never turns into a yes. Napoleon Hill drew attention to these invisible forces. He knew that it was not enough to have a clear desire. It was necessary to confront the hidden enemies of action. And one of the greatest is this belief that making a mistake is unforgivable, that it is only worth trying if you are certain of success. But the soul does not develop in certainty. It flourishes in the sacred risk of trying, in imperfect surrender, in the gesture that defies logic to honor the inner call. Taking action is not irresponsibility. It is spiritual courage. It is you saying that you trust your vibration more than the fear you inherited. It is a gesture of breaking with old stories that no longer serve you, because if you keep expecting everything to be safe, you will never get anywhere. True security is not in the absence of error. It is in the certainty that you can deal with whatever comes your way, with whatever you feel, with whatever you discover along the way. The energy of action is not born from perfectionism. It is born from acceptance, from the deep understanding that there is no error in sincere movement, that each attempt, even if it does not lead you where you want it, brings you closer to who you really are. And this reunion, more than any result, is what heals you. It is what strengthens you. It is what frees you from the voices that once tried to protect you, but that now no longer make sense to continue listening to. Some decisions aren't difficult because they're complicated. They're difficult because they threaten who you believe you are. There's a place in your brain that doesn't differentiate between change and danger. It interprets something new as a threat, and it acts to protect you, even if that protection means keeping you paralyzed. It's called identity, and identity, as painful as it may be, is familiar. That's why it's sometimes easier to stay in a life that doesn't represent you than to face the pain of becoming someone new. When you're faced with a big choice, it's not just logic that kicks in. It's an entire emotional security system that activates. Your brain starts creating catastrophic scenarios. Your body starts feeling tension. Your mind silently starts sabotaging you. What if it doesn't work out? What if you regret it? What if people don't approve? But what's really happening there is a struggle between your desire for expansion and your attachment to your old identity. Neuroscience shows that the brain, programmed to protect, seeks to maintain homeostasis, a state of balance. And this balance, however uncomfortable it may be, is what it already knows. Leaving it, even for something better, generates a kind of emotional short circuit. The impulse to move forward clashes with the fear of losing the narrative that has sustained you up until now, because every big decision carries a small death. the death of what you are, no longer, the death of who you need to stop being in order to experience something new. Napoleon Hill spoke about this point clearly. For him, hesitation was a form of self-deception, a symptom of the mind that, unconsciously, tries to protect itself from a new reality. And the only cure for this is awareness. It is looking deeply and compassionately at the origin of fear, not to get rid of it, but to understand it. Because fear, many times, just wants to be heard. It just wants to be acknowledged. It just wants you to say, I know you're there, but you won't stop me. Every time you avoid a big decision, what you're avoiding is not the choice. It's the transformation it demands. It's the new identity it summons. It's the shedding of the old self that has become too comfortable to be easily abandoned. But the truth is that you weren't born to live forever in the same persona. Your soul wants change. It wants truth. It wants freedom. And no freedom is possible without the courage to decide even when you're afraid. Even when you have no guarantees. Even when you're someone else on the other side of the choice. The mind avoids big decisions not because they're impossible, but because they change everything. And that everything sometimes includes you. It includes your image, your role, your certainties. But it also includes your freedom, your expansion, your reunion with that which has always been silent inside you, waiting for you to finally choose to move. Choose to live. Choose to leave behind not only what hurt you, but also what no longer serves you, even if it served you for a long time, even if it seemed necessary, even if it still hurts. There is a silent myth that sabotages many journeys. The idea that there will be an ideal moment, a moment when everything will make sense, fear will disappear, and action will happen naturally. This waiting for the perfect time is often a well-disguised excuse. It is the spiritual postponement of life. It is the hope that one day, perhaps, circumstances will align themselves. But the perfect time does not exist. What exists is the present time, and it is in this time that transformation begins. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, said that action delays doubt, and that doubt erases action. This phrase resonates to this day because it carries a timeless truth. The mind, when left alone, invents obstacles. And the more time you give to thought, the more it creates. The more it complicates. The more it paralyzes. Thought needs movement to dissolve. Action is like a wind that clears the fog. It does not have to be grand. It just has to happen. Napoleon Hill also observed this. In his studies of great achievers, he noticed that those who acted the most were those who waited the least for ideal conditions. They understood that time is not a scenario that fits you. It is an energy that you go through. And this crossing requires courage, because acting now in the midst of uncertainty is a declaration of faith. A faith that does not wait for signs, that does not demand proof, that does not depend on astral alignments or the absence of fear. Perfect timing most of the time is just fear dressed up as prudence. It is the heart saying, I am not ready, when what it really feels is, I am afraid. And fear in turn does not need more time. It needs more presence. It needs a choice made in spite of it. Because fear does not disappear with the calendar. It dissolves in the act, in the gesture, in the movement. Waiting for the right moment is like wanting to swim only when the sea is still. But the sea never stops. It pulses, it vibrates, it challenges. And you were not made for still waters. You were made to sail even in the waves, even with headwinds, even with uncertainty. Because within you there is a center that knows, a core that remains, an essence that, when activated, guides the next step. And the next step always happens in the now, never in the later. The illusion of perfect timing keeps brilliant souls stuck in empty routines, big dreams parked in silent minds. But the universe does not wait, it responds. It dances to your rhythm. And when you stop, it silences. When you move, it pulses. And this pulse, this return, only happens when you decide that now is enough. that now is sacred, that now is all you have to begin what your soul can no longer postpone. Anxiety about the future arises from a disconnection with the present. It is like an emotional storm that tries to anticipate pain that may never exist. It takes shape in questions that have no answers, in projections that do not come true, in mental images of a tomorrow full of uncertainty. And the more you try to control what has not yet arrived, the further you distance yourself from the only energy capable of generating real change: presence. When you think about what could go wrong, what could be missing, what could hurt, your body responds as if all of this were already happening. Your heart races, your breathing shortens, your mind goes into a state of survival. You stop living. You start surviving within a scenario that is not even real. It is as if the future, which does not yet exist, kidnaps your vital energy. And the more you feed this cycle, the harder it becomes to act. Because the body, taken over by the anticipation of fear, freezes. And the soul, suffocated by excess thinking, becomes silent. It is at this point that consciousness becomes a healing tool. There is a subtle but powerful practice called conscious temporal inversion. It is an invitation for you to stop visiting the future with fear and start visiting it with relief, with confidence, with a presence so strong that it can cross time with love. Instead of imagining what could go wrong, imagine what you will feel after you act. Feel now the relief that will come when what you fear has passed. Feel now the freedom of having overcome fear. Feel now the lightness of having done what was necessary. Bring the healed future into the dense present. This changes everything. This inversion is not an escape. It is transmutation. It is you using your imagination not as a creator of suffering, but as a channel of vibrational transformation. Because when you feel now the energy of what is yet to happen, you send a signal to the universe. A signal that you are ready, a signal that you trust, a signal that you will not wait any longer to align your frequency with what you want to experience. Napoleon Hill did not speak of anxiety in these terms, but his teaching touched on the same truth. He said that it is in the mind that one wins first, and winning in the mind is this: learning to feel victory before it happens, not as an illusion, but as a vibrational preparation, as an energetic seed, as a daily practice of trust. Deconstructing anxiety about the future is not an instantaneous act. It is a ritual, a constant choice to return to the body, to return to the now, to remember that the only moment that exists is this one, and that it is in this moment that change begins. Not in thought, not in doubt, but in the subtle touch of presence that says, I am here, I am whole. And this moment is enough to move me. Everything you send out comes back to you. This is one of the most silent and infallible laws of life, and it does not respond to the logic of words, but to the vibration of emotion. It doesn't matter how much you say you want something new, if what you feel deep down is fear of failure, because the electromagnetic field that surrounds your body, that energetic signature that you silently carry, does not lie. It captures your real frequency. And the universe, however compassionate it may be, responds to that frequency, not to the desire that contradicts it. Joe Dispenza clearly shows that the heart and the brain create this field together, a field that can expand or contract, that can attract opportunities or push them away, that can create bridges or walls. And what determines this is not isolated thought, but sustained emotion. If the emotion that dominates your body is fear of failure, this energy creates a barrier. And this barrier is not visible to the eyes, but it is felt by life, like a frequency that says, I'm not ready, even when the mind screams, I want to. Napoleon Hill, when observing those who demonstrated great achievements, noticed a pattern. They were not the most intelligent, nor the most prepared, but they were the most committed to the emotion of faith. Not blind faith, but vibrational faith. Faith that translates into gesture, in presence, in movement. These men and women acted as if they already were what they wanted to be. And because of this, the world responded as if it were already real. Because reality is not shaped by theoretical intention, but by energetic coherence. The fear of making mistakes, when not embraced, becomes the predominant emotion in the field. It drains vitality, it blocks creative flows, it silences boldness, and above all, it prevents the body from aligning with courage. Because courage is not born in the absence of fear, but in the ability to not identify with it. When you understand this, fear stops being an enemy. It becomes a sign, a call, a reminder that you are about to surpass an old limit. Your electromagnetic field is a mirror of what you allow yourself to feel consistently. And if you want to change what you are attracting, you need to change what you are sustaining internally. Not with mental effort, but with emotional awareness. With practices that bring you back to your body. With gestures that reconnect you with the truth of who you are. Because when emotions change, everything changes. And the universe has no choice but to respond. You don't need to eliminate fear. You just need to let it not be the highest note in your inner music. You need to tune it with other emotions, with intention, with presence, with small acts of truth. Because that is what reprograms your field. That is what activates a new frequency. And it is this new frequency that the universe listens to when it decides what will bring you back. Not because of what you want, but because of what you vibrate. Because of what you allow yourself to be, even before you become it, even before you achieve it. Even now, there is a silent force behind every great achievement, an energy that precedes certainty, a type of confidence that does not depend on external evidence. It is faith in motion, the ability to act before proof, to walk without a map, to believe without seeing. This is the mental model that transforms intention into reality. It is what W. Clement Stone called acting with faith before evidence, a choice that is not born of logic, but of the soul. And this choice changes everything. When you act before you are certain, something profound happens in your energy field. You send a signal that says, I trust, not because everything is clear, but because you have chosen not to wait any longer. This action, however small, however timid, however insecure, opens a new flow of energy. It breaks through vibrational stagnation. It communicates to the universe that you are available, that you have set yourself in motion. And this movement, however imperfect it may be, is magnetic. Napoleon Hill observed that those who achieve great things rarely had total clarity at the beginning. They started with an idea, an intention, a spark. And this spark only became a flame when it was fed by action, by the choice to do it, even without knowing what the next step would be, because it is in movement that clarity emerges. Not before, not on paper, not in waiting, but in living, pulsating, present action. Waiting for evidence is to remain still. It is to give more power to fear than to possibility. And fear, when fed, grows. It takes up space. It establishes itself as truth. Therefore, acting before clarity is a spiritual act. It is a practice of liberation. It is you anticipating the reality you want to live. It is you saying, I am greater than my doubt, greater than my hesitation, greater than my old history. Vibrational faith is not blind. It sees beyond. It sees with the eyes of the soul. And the soul knows. The soul has always known, but sometimes the mind needs the gesture to believe. It needs to see the body move to convince itself that it is possible. And that is the beauty of acting with faith before evidence. It heals the mind while honoring the spirit. It reprograms fear while strengthening confidence. You don't need guarantees. You need presence, courage, availability. Because life does not reveal itself to those who wait with doubt, but to those who surrender with truth. And surrender, even if shaky, even if imperfect, is the password to access what is already available, but only manifests itself when you decide that you will no longer wait for permission to exist fully. There is a paradox that few people realize, but that silently imprisons us. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to choose. And when everything seems possible, nothing comes to fruition. Too many choices paralyze us, freeze us, misalign us, because the human mind was not made to carry all possibilities at the same time. It needs direction, focus, commitment to a single vibration at a time. Otherwise, the energy disperses, fragments, and nothing truly flourishes. We live in an era where the abundance of alternatives, instead of freeing us, suffocates us. With each new idea, a new doubt also arises. With each new path, a new hesitation. And in this maze of choices, the soul gets lost. Because the heart does not want 1,000 paths. It wants meaning, and meaning is not found by jumping from option to option. Meaning is revealed in depth, in sustained choice, in the yes that does not depend on 1,000 guarantees, but on a clear vibration. Behavioral psychology explains that the brain wears out when faced with too many options. He enters a state of silent confusion where everything seems feasible, but nothing seems certain. This generates anxiety, guilt, and a constant feeling of always starting and never finishing. And this feeling weakens the vibrational field, because the energy of creation demands commitment. It demands a decision that is maintained, a path chosen and followed, even with uncertainty. Napoleon Hill knew this. He observed that great achievers did not oscillate between possibilities. They chose, and they made the choice fertile ground, not because they were certain, but because they knew that clarity would come from deepening, not from multiplying. Doubt is not resolved with more information. It is dissolved with presence, with action, with fidelity to a vibrational intention. Simplifying is a spiritual act. It is you saying, I refuse to lose myself in excess. I choose to be whole where my soul beats. And this kind of decision has power because it aligns mind, emotion, and body in a single frequency. And it is this coherence that creates reality. It is not the variety of options that changes your life. It is the depth of your surrender to a single direction. It is the yes that echoes in the body, that sustains fear, that honors the path. Reducing is not limiting. It is liberating. It is taking away the weight of the obligation to get everything right, and trusting that a sincere choice, even if imperfect, is worth more than 1,000 unfulfilled intentions. The soul does not seek the best. It seeks the true, and the true only appears when you have the courage to simplify, to commit, to walk even when you still do not see the end. Because what transforms is not the number of available paths. It is the truth with which you step on the ground you have chosen to call your own. There is a type of prison that almost no one sees. It is subtle, silent, comfortable. It is the habit of repeating what is known, even if it hurts. It is the unconscious choice to continue in the same pattern, not for pleasure, but out of habit, because the brain, when it is not reprogrammed, prefers familiar suffering to the possibility of a new state. It understands that what has already been experienced is, in some way, safe. And safety, for it, is more important than freedom. You may be aware that something is wrong. You may deeply desire to change. But if your energy is conditioned to repeat what you have always experienced, your body will pull you back into the same cycles. These are automatic gestures, recycled thoughts, addicted emotions. All of this creates a feeling that change is impossible, but it is not. It is just uncomfortable, because real change requires emotional friction. It requires a clash between the old and the new, and this clash at times hurts. The path to transformation begins when you allow yourself to deconstruct what is familiar, and this doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small daily ruptures. When you realize that you're acting on autopilot and choose to do something different. When you feel the same emotion over and over again and choose not to react in the same way. When you stop justifying your pain with the same stories. This friction is the beginning of freedom. It's what reprograms. It uninstalls. It makes room. Napoleon Hill understood that the greatest challenge is not to create something new. It's to break with the old. It's to resist the magnetic force of unconscious habit. He saw the mind as fertile, but conditioned, ground. And only those who have the courage to touch the root of what seems natural can plant something truly transformative. Because what is natural is not always what is true. Sometimes it's just what has been repeated for too long. The soul doesn't want to live in repetition. It wants expansion. But to do so, it's necessary to allow for the discomfort of renewal. It's necessary to endure the discomfort of not knowing what it will be like yet, of walking without the certainties of the past, of opening up to new things, even if they bring insecurity. And this is the greatest act of faith, believing that there is something beyond what you have already experienced, that there is a version of you that has not yet been expressed, that is alive, pulsating, waiting to be chosen. An unconscious habit is like a river that always follows the same course, but you are not the river. You are the one who can choose new banks, new paths, new destinations, even if your body screams for the old, even if your mind tries to pull you back, because there is a point at which continuing in the familiar ceases to be comfort and becomes betrayal, betrayal of your soul, of your potential, of your light. And at that point, the only true way out is rupture, the choice to interrupt the cycle, to make way with the courage of someone who has already understood that repeating yourself is not security. It is forgetting who you came to be. In nature, everything follows a rhythm. Everything sprouts, grows, matures, and transforms without haste, but also without hesitation. A seed does not wait for the perfect moment to burst. It feels the call of the darkness, the heat of the earth, the humidity of the environment, and even without guarantees, it begins to open. It does not know for sure what it will find above ground. It has no control over the weather, the rocks, the winds, but still it moves, because that is its instinct, its mission, its pulse. Human beings, on the other hand, have learned to distrust their own rhythm. Conditioned by the logic of productivity and the fear of making mistakes, they have begun to wait for ideal conditions before acting. But this goes against the very essence of life, because living is taking risks. It is sprouting even without seeing the sky. It is making space even without knowing if it will be well received. And it is precisely in this movement of trusting the natural rhythm of the soul that true expansion occurs. Nature does not question whether it is ready. It responds to impulse, to frequency, to the presence of the now. And this is a profound lesson for those who are stuck in paralysis. Because if you wait for the perfect season, the perfect soil, the ideal setting, you will never move. But if you start, even in the dark, even when you are afraid, something in you aligns with the force of creation. This force does not ask for guarantees. It asks for surrender. Napoleon Hill spoke of it as a magnetic field, and this field is only activated by movement. It does not matter how small the action is, it needs to begin. It needs to exist, because only then does the path reveal itself. The road does not appear before the step. The map is not given to those who wait. It is drawn by those who set out to walk, and it is in this walking, in this sacred rhythm of aligned action, that life begins to respond. The seed does not wait for the world's permission to be born. It obeys the call of its own vibration. And this call lives within you too. It is in the restlessness that you feel, in the silent discomfort that insists on reminding you that there is something more. It is in the desire to change, to break through, to blossom. And even if everything around you says it's not the right time, there's a part of you that already knows. The moment won't be perfect, but the call is true. Nature teaches us that it's not perfection that brings blossoming. It's surrendering to the flow. It's the courage to break through, to let something new pass through you, to trust that, even without seeing the sky, you can grow. Even without knowing your destination, you can follow. Even without guarantees, you can be. Because the rhythm of the soul doesn't wait. It pulses. It calls. And it just needs you to listen, to say yes, to allow yourself to blossom, exactly where you are, exactly as you are. There's a strength that's born in the imperfect, a kind of freedom that can only be found when you allow things to start outside of the ideal. Acting before you're ready is an act of courage, But acting even without the guarantee of getting it right is an act of liberation, because when you allow yourself to do something poorly, you're not just breaking perfectionism, you're deactivating a vibrational prison. You are telling the universe that you prefer the real to the ideal, that you choose the truth of action over the illusion of waiting. There is an energetic logic behind imperfect movement. It breaks patterns. It challenges the fear of rejection. It takes you out of the role of spectator and puts you at the center of creation. When you act even without knowing what will come, you activate a new type of magnetism, a force field that is not based on aesthetics, but on intention. And this intention, when sincere, when aligned, has more power of manifestation than any impeccable plan that never got off the ground. Napoleon Hill understood that the world is not transformed by brilliant ideas that are not realized, but by courageous steps taken in the midst of confusion. He knew that waiting for perfection is a type of disguised sabotage, because the fear of making a mistake paralyzes us more than the mistake itself. And when you understand this, you begin to act differently. You begin to see that every action, even if it is crooked, is a right move. That every real gesture is a vibrational prayer that says, I am ready to be who I am and not who the world expects me to be. The do it badly now is not sloppiness. It's a ritual. It's a symbol. It's a restart. It's you saying that you prefer the risk of imperfection to the stagnation of doubt. It's a silent cry of authenticity, a choice that breaks the mirror of external expectations and returns you to your own frequency. Because energy responds to action, not to theory, not to perfectionism, not to a self-image manipulated by fear. When you move, even with tremors, even with mistakes, something reorganizes itself inside and out. The field aligns, the universe notices, and everything around you begins to cooperate with this new flow. You don't have to get it right the first time. You just have to get into the game, start the cycle, give the universe something to amplify, because it can only amplify what already exists. And if nothing exists yet, nothing will be multiplied. The act of acting imperfectly is, in fact, a ritual of magnetic activation, a portal that opens every time you say yes, even when you're afraid, that you move, even without a map, that you expose yourself, even without armor. And it is there, in that truly precise moment, that the magic begins. Not because everything went well, but because finally, you stopped waiting for external conditions to validate your own light. And that, in itself, is a miracle. It is transformation. It is a new beginning vibrating in its purest form. The gaze of others weighs more than any physical obstacle. There is an invisible force that paralyzes you when you begin to imagine how others will judge you, how they will see you, what they will think, what they will say. This imaginary surveillance is often crueler than any external reality because it is born from an ancestral fear, the fear of being rejected, of being excluded, of not belonging. And this fear shapes gestures, silences truths, weakens decisions. From a very early age, we learn to adapt, to hide what we feel, to say what is expected, to act as expected. This adaptation, although it has guaranteed acceptance at times, has also disconnected us from spontaneity, from the raw truth that lives in every impulse we want to follow, but repress. The fear of external gaze then becomes an internal prison, a vibrational field that says, don't expose yourself, don't stand out, don't move. Napoleon Hill understood that true genius is not compatible with the need for approval. He knew that those who change the world are not those who wait for applause, but those who follow through even when misunderstood. And following through does not mean being reckless. It means being whole, aligned with an inner truth that screams louder than the fear of judgment, a truth that pulses with more force than any attempt to fit in. To break this pattern, it is not enough to rationalize. A vibrational gesture of rupture is necessary. An act that, however small, affirms, I choose to be who I am, even if they look at me sideways, even if they do not understand, even if they criticize. This decision, however subtle it may seem, changes your frequency. It gives you back your power because you stop acting for others and start vibrating for yourself. And the universe responds to authenticity with more force than it responds to obedience. Freedom is not the absence of judgment. It is the presence of intention. It is knowing that looks will come, but that none of them can define your path. Because the most important look is the one you give yourself when you see yourself trying, when you see yourself daring, when you see yourself breaking an invisible chain that has kept you silent for too long. The fear of the outside world loses its strength when you stop seeking recognition and start seeking truth. When you realize that pleasing everyone is too high a price to pay for your own absence, that belonging to others is costly when you abandon yourself in the process, and that no criticism has more power than the vibration of a gesture that comes from your essence. This gesture, even timid, is a revolution. It is healing. It is the beginning of the return to your own light. There are pains that are not visible, and there are obstacles that simply seem to have no explanation. But behind every obstacle there is a story. Sometimes this story involves success. Yes, success. Because growing, achieving, expanding can also awaken fear. Fear of losing the love of those you love. Fear of being excluded from the circle that has welcomed you until today. Fear of no longer fitting in. That is exactly what happened to that businessman who, despite all the opportunities, would always get stuck when he was about to take a bigger step. He was not afraid of failure. He was afraid of what success represented. Fear of surpassing his childhood friends, of earning more than his family ever earned, of becoming someone that others no longer recognized. And this silent guilt kept him stuck. He self-sabotaged. He justified it with perfectionism, with the need for more preparation, with a lack of time. But in truth, it was the fear of rejection that paralyzed him. It was only when he realized that his stagnation was not a lack of ability, but an unconscious fidelity to old bonds, that something began to change. He understood that growing up is not betraying anyone. It is honoring what is most true in oneself. And this truth does not diminish the other. It simply shows a new path. A path that may even distance one physically, but never needs to disconnect energetically. As long as it is followed with love, with integrity, with presence. He started small, with daily micro-actions, gesture by gesture, decision by decision. Nothing grandiose, nothing too visible, but each movement was a message to his own body. I can move forward without losing who I am. And over time, these small choices began to reprogram his frequency. Fear still appeared, but it no longer ruled. Guilt still whispered, but it no longer held him back. This story is not unique. It echoes in thousands of people who get stuck not because of a lack of talent, but because they are afraid of no longer being who others expect. But the truth is that their soul did not fit in. It came to expand. And true fidelity is not in repeating roles, but in being authentic. Because when you allow yourself to flourish, you give silent permission for others to flourish too. It's not about pulling away. It's about inspiring. It's about reminding everyone that there is life beyond stagnation, and that every light you manifest can illuminate paths that are still dark for others. That's vibrational power. That's legacy. That's liberation. There is a frequency that changes at the exact moment you choose to face what you fear. Fear, when overcome, reorganizes your energy field. It stops being an obstacle and becomes an impulse. And this happens because courage activates parts of the brain linked to overcoming. It changes your internal chemistry. It alters your vibration. It is not just a beautiful emotion. It is a physical, biological, spiritual movement. When you do what you fear, even on a small scale, you break the survival mode circuit. This circuit is the one that keeps you on constant alert, always expecting the worst, always avoiding pain. But it also blocks the flow of life. It closes the channels of creativity, intuition, connection. And when you move towards fear, even with your body shaking, this circuit begins to deactivate. You leave the automatic and enter into presence. Napoleon Hill spoke of the importance of facing your own ghosts. For him, courage was more than a virtue. It was a tool for achievement, because nothing great is born within the comfort zone. Everything that expands your life first challenges its limits. And each time you cross this threshold, a part of you is reborn, a part that was hidden under the protection of fear, and that now reveals itself with strength, with brilliance, with truth. This transformation does not only happen on the mental plane, it reverberates in the body. Breathing changes, heartbeat reorganizes, the feeling of inner power grows, because doing what scares you is a powerful vibrational affirmation. It says to the universe, I trust my purpose more than my panic. I choose to live, even without guarantees. I am ready to rewrite my own frequency. And the most beautiful thing is that this new vibration spreads. It positively contaminates. It inspires. It changes not only your reality, but that of those who observe you. Because courage is contagious. It creates invisible permissions. It opens portals for others to move to. And so, in a gesture of crossing your own fear, you activate a network of expansion that goes beyond you. It is not about becoming immune to fear, but about recognizing that it is not the end. It is the beginning of a new state, a portal, a bridge. And crossing it is choosing to live in the frequency of what is possible, and not in the prison of what was. It is a leap, not into the dark, but into the sacred, into the unknown that holds your next version, the one that will only be accessed when you say yes to the challenge, yes to the butterflies in your stomach, yes to the freedom that awaits you right after the crossing. The energy of action can be unblocked in layers. What paralyzes you is not always at the most visible level. Sometimes the blockage is buried under beliefs, emotions, and automatisms that act in silence. And that is why the process of unblocking requires depth. It is not a fight. It is a dive, a listening, a patient acceptance of everything that is behind the "I can't do it." The first layer is recognition. It is looking head-on at the vibrational pattern that you have been repeating, not with guilt, but with presence. You begin to realize that there is a cycle, that there is an unconscious script, and, more importantly, that it can be seen, and everything that is seen can be transformed. This conscious observation already changes the frequency because it brings light, it takes it out of the automatic, and it prepares the field for the next step. The second layer is the rupture. And this rupture is not an explosion. It is a question that penetrates the old pattern like a vibrational needle, a question that opens cracks in the armor of fear. What is this paralysis protecting me from feeling? This question does not seek an intellectual answer. It seeks to access the emotional core. It wants to touch the exact place where you have disconnected from yourself. And when that place is touched, something softens, something opens, something gives way. The third layer is the gesture. It is the movement, even if small, even if uncomfortable. It is the body saying, I heard you. I am here. I can move. This movement does not have to be grand. It can be 2 minutes of presence, 2 minutes of simple but intentional action. This physical choice seals the new frequency. It anchors in the world what was previously only intention. And it is in that instant that the field begins to respond, because the universe responds to coherence. It recognizes the gesture as a vibrational declaration of freedom. Napoleon Hill knew that true power lies in practice, not in theory. And this practice needs to touch body, mind, and emotion. It needs to be complete, because stagnant energy does not dissolve with positive thinking. It transforms with awareness, friction, and action. With a journey that begins with recognizing the pattern, moves through the courage to feel what was hidden, and is concretized in the act that affirms a new choice. These 3 layers are not techniques. They are paths of realignment. They do not require perfection. They only require truth. They only ask that you be willing to get in touch with your own frequency and move it from the inside out. Because when that happens, it is not just your action that changes. It is your identity. It is your vibration. It is your life. And everything around you begins to rearrange itself to reflect this new version of you that has finally decided not only to desire, but to live. There are times when resistance is not a sign of failure, but of alignment. When everything inside you hesitates, when every cell seems to scream, "Don't go," that may be exactly where your next level of expansion lies. Because true transformation rarely comes with comfort. It comes with friction, with discomfort, with the feeling of being about to break through something old to make way for the new. Napoleon Hill understood this dynamic. For him, resistance was often the last obstacle before advancement. The mind, accustomed to the known, tries to protect you from the unknown. It creates barriers, doubts, fears. But these barriers are not enemies. They are signs. Signs that you are getting closer to something significant. Resistance is like a locked door. It is not there to block your passage, but to test your resolve. It asks, do you really want this? Are you willing to go through the discomfort to achieve what you want? And when you respond with action, even if you are trembling, even if you are uncertain, the door opens. Not because you forced it, but because you demonstrated commitment. This crossing is more than physical. It's energetic. Each step you take toward what scares you recalibrates your frequency. You stop vibrating at the frequency of fear and start vibrating at the frequency of courage. And the universe responds to this new vibration with opportunities, encounters, synchronicities. So when you feel resistance, don't back down immediately. Observe, feel, ask yourself, what's on the other side of this discomfort? And if the answer is growth, freedom, fulfillment, maybe it's time to cross over. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. The resistance then stops being an obstacle and becomes a guide. It points the way to the next version of you, the one that's waiting to emerge as soon as you decide that the discomfort of growth is preferable to the comfort of stagnation. There are times when resistance is not a blockage, it is a sign, a warning that you are too close to what really matters. Because before expansion, there is almost always tightness. Before clarity, there is confusion. Before the leap, the body trembles. This is the dance of transformation, and discomfort is not a mistake in the process. It is the process itself. When everything inside you hesitates, when fear gains voice, when doubt seems invincible, perhaps that is exactly where the portal is. The portal to the new version of yourself. And what many do at this moment is retreat. Stop. Give up. But what few realize is that this discomfort is a threshold. A call, a silent test, asking, are you really ready to go further? Napoleon Hill said that the greatest progress often comes right after the greatest challenge, because the subconscious resists that which threatens the old self. It wants to preserve the known, even if it is a prison. Therefore, the greater the resistance, the greater the potential for transformation that is being blocked. Discomfort, then, should not always be avoided. It should be listened to. It brings messages. This type of resistance is energetic. It vibrates in the field, like a tension, like a knot, like a feeling that something is going to break. And yes, it will, but not everything that breaks is a loss. Sometimes it is liberation. It is the end of a cycle. It is the collapse of a pattern. And after it, something new can emerge. Something that was waiting for space to be born. Something that you would not be able to access if you had remained where you were comfortable. The real question at this point is not, why am I feeling this? But what is trying to be born through this discomfort? This shift in perspective changes everything, because instead of running away from resistance, you embrace it, you sit with it, you listen to what it wants to protect, what it wants to hide, and in that act of listening, it loses strength, it dissolves, because it has been seen, because it has been understood, because it has no longer been treated as an enemy. Growth is not silent. It creaks, it tears, it demands detachment from what was once secure, and this demand often presents itself as resistance. But when you move through this moment with presence, with love, with faith, the other side reveals a new frequency, a new version, a new center of internal gravity, and with it, a new way of being. So the next time resistance appears, remember, it may be the last guardian before the miracle. It may be the birth, pangs of a new reality. And if you listen to it with an open heart, you may discover that what you called a barrier was, in fact, the threshold of your own freedom, the point where the old falls away so that the new can finally be. Napoleon Hill said, "Action is the true test of faith." And perhaps there is no more accurate phrase to end this journey, because faith in the vibrational field is not intellectual belief. It is not positive thinking. It is coherence between what you feel, what you choose, and what you do. It is the silent gesture that says, even without seeing, I move. Even with fear, I remain. Even without certainty, I honor my energy. Most people wait for a sign, an external push, an ideal day. But the sign is the action itself. It is when you decide to stand up, even without applause. It is when you send a message, even without knowing the answer. It is when you start, even trembling. And this choice, as simple as it may seem, changes your vibration, because it shows the universe that you are not just wishing, you are taking action, living, embodying. Ralph Waldo Emerson, long before modern success manuals, already understood this. He wrote, "Do the thing, and you will have the power." And this is not a metaphor. It is energy physics. Power does not come first. It is born from the act. It is the response that only reveals itself to those who move, to those who cross paths, to those who make themselves vulnerable to life and still say, "I will continue." When you act, even if discreetly, you change your energetic signature. You emit a new sound to the universe, a sound that is not just a request, it is presence, a sound that is not just will, it is vibration in coherence. And the universe responds to coherence, not to unaligned intention, not to disconnected theory, not to passive desire, but to the gesture that pulses in tune with what you say you want to live. The biggest obstacle is not the fear of failure. It is the fear of losing the identity of who you have been until now, because acting requires detachment. It requires saying goodbye to the old version of yourself, the one that protected itself, that avoided, that waited. And this morning, although silent, is real, but it is necessary, because you cannot access the new by carrying what kept you trapped. You need to let go. You need to open up. You need to allow the void of the unknown to be the womb of your rebirth. This is the final invitation, not for you to become someone new, but for you to start acting like who you already are, like someone who already vibrates, already feels, already lives the energy you want to attract. Action precedes the miracle, always. And the miracle, when it comes, is not external. It is internal. It is the silent realignment between who you were, who you believed you were, and who finally you allow yourself to be. Here, now, in movement, in truth, in faith, vibrating through the simplest but most profound gesture of all, the one that comes from your soul saying yes.